Now before I get into mixing up the sheetrock mud, there's an important step I have to do first to all these little patches. Let's just work on this one right here. I've got to take a sponge. I'm going to wet it first. And I'm just going to wash it in to the existing surrounding area. And now all that means is you're taking the outside of your patch, and this can go with any sort of patch that you do. You want to kind of do that, and it kind of takes any roughness on the outside edge and it just kind of blends it in and kind of mashes it down, especially if you've got texture, a spray texture, a skip trowel texture, anything like that. Okay, and it sort of just knocks it down and blends it all in, because the last thing you want is for your patch, when you get all done with it, you see, oh, there it is right there. Here it is right around the edge. Yeah, he did a real good job on the texture, but I can still see his patch around the edge. Why didn't he do something to it? And you don't have to sand the rest of the patch. You can just get it wet a little bit, you know, if you want, before we get going. Now, you can take a bigger sponge than that to do it. Here, let's do this one here. I'm going to use the same sponge, but if you have a bigger sponge, you can use a bigger sponge too. If you don't, and if you just have a few little patches to do, you can use a small sponge like this. And I've got my trusty construction light on, and it helps me see exactly what I'm doing. If you don't have a construction light, you need to get one. One of these days, I know you're going to get one. The more times you hear it from me, you must think, wow, Joe really thinks I need to get one of those. I better get one, especially if I want to start doing my own how-to projects and repairs. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm doing on that patch. I don't have to wet the whole thing. I'm going to put a skip trowel on there anyways, so I can just concentrate on getting around the edges. Okay, so keep doing that. I'm going to keep doing it on these patches. Okay, you get ready on your patches. Don't forget now, see along the edge, if it's got just a hair higher edge than the rest of it, you can just keep rubbing on it. And sheetrock mud, when it gets wet, you can just kind of wipe it right off, you know. So be careful that you don't do too much. Now, if your patches have any roughness around on the middle of the patch, let's say, you know, if I've got a little bit of a groove or a ridge there, I can look at the existing ceiling, and this is a knockdown. It's not a knockdown, it's a skip trowel. So there's a lot of roughness going on in the ceiling. I don't have to have the rest of the patch exactly 100% perfectly smooth. Okay, so if you've got a few little lines in there, you can kind of leave some of those if you want. And I really like the fact that I have this light. Can't tell you how much easier it is to see everything that I'm doing. Okay, keep working it. Now here's something I want you to realize. We're in an existing kitchen area, and we've got a few things draped over here to protect a few things. But this is in an area that is not new construction, and you might think, oh, I'll just take those patches. I got them plenty smooth, and I'm just going to take those patches and I'm going to go ahead and hit the sander on there. You know, just a sanding pole. Once you do that, I wouldn't do that if I was you. You know, you throw all the fine dust into the air, and it gets everywhere. No matter you know, you can still do as good as you can by keeping the sanding to a minimum and the dust to a minimum. You do that, you got to make sure your air conditioner is off, your ceiling fan is off, your windows are closed, and all of that. But even then, it just eventually gets all over the place. So if you have just a few patches or something, you can do it this way. Then you don't need a sanding pole or a sanding pad or hand sander, a piece of sandpaper, whatever. Okay, there's a tip for you. Voila! Hey, if you've been watching this video series, I just showed you recently how to install these can lights. Okay, now these pieces of trim I left off. I just put one up there so they at least had a little bit of light before I got done with the ceiling, before the painter got here and all of that. But see, I've got some patches to do around that light, so I'm just going to pull that can out of there, the trim out of there. The important thing I always do is I turn the light switch off first so that I know there's no power there. And these come out really easy. Just loosen it like that, and there's some little wedgy deals that kind of fit up in there like friction. And here's the end of it, and I just unscrew it. It's that easy to remove these. This is an LED light. If you're thinking of installing any can lights, you might want to decide to go with the LED style. They're pretty easy, and they're going to be cheap to run. Think about that. Now see, since I put these patches on a skip trowel ceiling, I don't care how smooth you think you can get that with the sanding pole from down below, you're just not going to get around the little edges in between all the nooks and crannies around the edge. You think, okay, I'll just sand it more. Well, you sand it more and more, you're going to get down to your quick set that you put on for your patch area. We don't want that. Okay, we try to cover that up. So that's another reason why I'm doing it with the sponge. See, it doesn't really take very long. You can see exactly where I want to go. If I see a line too long, I can soften it just a little bit that way. Go around the edge. Get it like that. There's another patch ready. Last thing you want is for people to see your patch. You know, this is all about prep work. And if you do it right, it's going to look like a pro did it. You know, you talk to most sheetrockers and you ask them, hey, how do you wash in a patch on a textured ceiling, textured wall, spray texture, knockdown, orange peel, whatever it is. You've got to do this. Now, if this was a smooth wall finish, obviously you wouldn't have to do that. You could then do it with sander, or I could still do the edges or whatever with the sponge. Okay? I'm liking it. Now you might think, hey Joe, that's fine with small little patches, but what about this big huge patch? You got one small little sponge. How are you going to do that? Well, very simple. I'm going to go around the outside edge. And I don't have to do any on the inside unless I see any one little particular area, whatever, because you remember, if you've been watching, I put a tight skim over this, and I've got this nice and smooth. And I don't have to do any more to this except around the edges. And I don't have to sand it. I don't have to put a sponge on it. When I put the skip trowel on, it's going to go right over that just fine. Fine and dandy, Andy. It's not going to take very long for this to dry. By the time I mix up my mud and do a couple other little things, I'll be all ready to start putting this mud up here. Now there's a line right there, and boom, I got it, it's gone. So try washing your patches in next time. When somebody says, hey, did you wash your patch in? You'll know exactly what they're talking about, won't you? That's right. I did a really good job with this, and I'm looking at it, and even though it looked really good, I still like to just kind of do a once over as your eye kind of follows around at certain areas. You might think, oh, I would have missed that had the light not been on there, had I not looked on it all the way. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. I think I'm ready. So that didn't take very long. One silly little sponge like this, it was all I had. I could have used, had I had a better tile sponge, I could have used that, but hey, anything will do. Now what happens if you don't have a sponge? If you've got like a washcloth or a rag, wet rag, you know, you can basically do the same thing with that. All right, wash those patches in. Do it right.